Grand Admiral Vathra stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Sovereignty and watched the stars with cold satisfaction in her 4 eyes. Her scaled hands clasped behind her back as the moment she had waited 3 years to see finally arrived. The trap was perfect. And she knew it. 32 human vessels had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly into the Korath Nebula, exactly where Dominion intelligence had predicted they would appear, exactly where 200 of the Empire's finest warships waited in silent ambush. The humans called their little fleet the Vians. Liberation Fleet, a name that made Vathra's mandibles click with amusement whenever she heard it. Because what could such primitive creatures hope to liberate? And from whom did they think they could take anything? For 30 years, the humans had been a minor annoyance to the Dominion Empire, a young species that had somehow survived the initial conquest campaigns and continued to resist despite all logic and reason. Despite the obvious fact that they were outmatched in every possible way, their files were thin and unimpressive, showing a species with short lifespans of barely a century, fragile bodies that broke so easily, limited fleet capacity that numbered only a few thousand vessels at most, and industrial capability that could never hope to match even a single Dominion sector. They should have been conquered in the first campaign, 3 decades ago. But somehow they kept fighting, kept surviving, kept being stubborn, in ways that frustrated the Empire's generals and Marils today. That stubbornness would finally end. Vathra raised one clawed hand, and the tactical officer looked up at her with eager anticipation in his compound eyes. "To cloak all vessels," she commanded, her voice echoing through the massive bridge of the flagship. The order rippled outward through the fleet, and in an instant 200 Dominion warships shimmered into existence around the human formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack moons and shatter planets. The humans were caught in a gravity well created by the nebula's dense core, which meant their faster-than-light drives were useless, which meant they could not run, which meant they would have to fight against impossible odds. Vathra watched the human ships scramble into a defensive formation, and she felt something close to pity for them. These foolish creatures, who had dared to challenge an empire that had ruled this region of space for 4,000 years. "All ships," she said calmly, "open fire." The battle lasted 11 minutes. Dominion weapons tore through human shields like claws through paper, and one by one the human vessels broke apart under the overwhelming barrage, their hulls splitting open to release clouds of frozen atmosphere and spinning debris into the void. The void, linking them to release clouds of frozen atmosphere and spinning debris into the void. The humans fought back with desperate courage, their weapons scoring hits on Dominion ships here and there. But it made no difference against such overwhelming numbers when the last human vessel exploded in a silent bloom of orange fire and tumbling metal. Vathra allowed herself a rare smile that showed her rows of serrated teeth. The bridge crew erupted in triumphant clicks and hisses, officers congratulating each other on the perfect execution of the ambush, on the destruction of what they believed was humanity's main battle fleet. "Record this moment," Vathra commanded, raising her voice above the celebration, "and transmit it to all Dominion worlds so that every citizen may see that the human threat is finished at last." She turned away from the viewport, ready to return to her command chair and begin the next phase of operations, which would involve hunting down the remaining human colonies and finally completing the conquest that should have ended 30 years ago. But then she noticed that senior tactical officer Korath had not joined the celebration. He stood at his console with his chitin paling from its normal deep blue to an anxious gray color that Vathra had learned to recognize as fear, and his clawed hands moved across the controls with increasing urgency. "Tactical officer," Vathra said sharply, "explain your behavior." Korath looked up at her, and she saw genuine confusion mixed with that fear in his compound eyes. "Grand Admiral, I am analyzing the wreckage as per standard protocol, and there is something wrong with the data." "Wrong in what way?" "The crew counts," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "They do not match our intelligence files." Vathra moved toward his console with quick strides, her earlier satisfaction fading into something colder and more alert. Because Karth was not the type of officer who made mistakes or raised false alarms. "Show me," she demanded. The tactical display zoomed in on the largest pieces of wreckage, the remains of what had been the human flagship according to their records. A vessel that should have carried over 2,000 crew members. Karth's sensors swept through the debris field, scanning for organic material, for bodies, for any sign of the humans who should have died in the battle. The scan completed, and the results appeared on the screen. 0 organic signatures detected. "That cannot be correct," Vathra said. "Scan again." Karth ran the scan 3 more times, and each time the result was the same, showing no bodies, no organic material. Nothing to indicate that living beings had ever crewed those ships. "Expand the scan to the entire debris field," Vathra ordered, her voice growing harder with each word. The sensors swept across all the wreckage from all 32 destroyed vessels, and the final count appeared on the display in glowing numbers that made no sense. Total organic signatures detected across all vessels. 0. The bridge had gone quiet now as other officers noticed what was happening, the celebration dying away into confused silence as they watched their admiral stare at impossible data. "Grand Admiral," Karth said slowly, "these ships were not merely empty when we destroyed them." He pulled up detailed scans of the wreckage and pointed to specific sections with a shaking claw. "Look at the crew quarters." They were not crew quarters at all. They were cargo holds. And the life support systems were minimal installations that could never have sustained a crew. And the bridge sections had no chairs, no stations, no accommodations for living beings of any kind. Vathra felt something cold spreading through her chest as she understood what he was telling her. These vessels were never designed to carry crews. Karth continued. "They were drones, Grand Admiral. Autonomous weapons built to look like manned warships but controlled entirely by machines." "That is impossible," another officer said from across the bridge. "Our intelligence clearly shows that humans do not have that level of automation technology." "Then our intelligence is wrong," Vathra said quietly. And those words fell into the silence like stones into still water. She turned to face her crew and saw the same confusion and dawning fear on every face. The same terrible question forming in every mind. If those ships were decoys designed to be destroyed? If the humans had sent an empty fleet into an obvious trap? If they had sacrificed 32 vessels just to make the Dominion believe they had won a great victory, then where was their real fleet? And what were the humans actually planning? Vathra looked back at the debris field drifting slowly through the nebula, and for the first time in her long career she felt the cold touch of genuine uncertainty. "Get me a direct channel to Dominion High Command," she ordered, her voice carefully controlled despite the unease growing in her hearts. "And begin a full sensor sweep of every system within 50 light years." "What are we looking for, Grand Admiral?" Karth asked. Vathra did not answer immediately because she did not know the answer. And that frightened her more than anything else. What she did know was that the humans had just done something that no species in 4,000 years of Dominion history had ever managed to do. They had made the Empire look like fools, and Vathra had a terrible feeling that this was only the beginning. The High Council chamber on the Dominion homeworld had not seen such chaos in over a century, not since the last great war against the Vorthan Confederacy, which the Empire had crushed with brutal efficiency, but the Vorthan had been a known threat with known capabilities and known Weakness is the humans were something else entirely intelligence. Minister Karath stood before the assembled counselors with his chitin flushed a deep shade of embarrassment, his mandibles clicking nervously as he tried to defend 30 years of intelligence reports that had apparently been completely wrong. Our files on humanity are comprehensive, he insisted, his voice rising with desperation. Population of 11 billion across 12 industrial worlds. Military capacity of approximately 4,000 vessels. Technological level roughly equivalent to our own capabilities from 6 centuries ago. And yet they built a fleet of drone ships that fooled your entire intelligence apparatus. High Counselor Dreth said from his elevated seat. His ancient body hunched, but his eyes still sharp and cold. A deception, Karath said quickly. A desperate gambit by a dying species trying to buy time. Nothing more than a trick that will not work twice. Minister Karath, a new voice cut through the chamber, and everyone turned to see Grand Admiral Vaethra stride through the massive doors. She had traveled directly from the Karath Nebula to deliver her report in person, and she looked like she had not slept in the 3 days since the battle. I have reviewed the recovered data cores from the human vessels, she said, not waiting for permission to speak. I must inform this council that the situation is far worse than the minister suggests. Karath's chitin paled visibly as Vaethra took her place at the speaking platform and activated the holographic display. The ships we destroyed were not merely empty, she began. They were never designed to carry crews at all. Which means this was not a last-minute trick or a desperate gamble. She pulled up detailed schematics recovered from the wreckage. These vessels were built from the beginning as decoys, with every system optimized for remote operation, with hull sections designed to break apart in visually dramatic ways, with engine signatures carefully calibrated to match what our sensors expected to see from human military vessels. What are you suggesting? Counselor Thrall asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. I am suggesting that humanity has been lying to us from the very beginning, Vaethra said. I have evidence to support this conclusion. She changed the display to show a star map of human-controlled space. At least what the Dominion had always believed was human-controlled space. Our files say humanity occupies 12 industrial worlds with a total population of 11 billion. She said. But 3 days ago, I ordered our long-range sensor arrays to conduct a full sweep of the region using parameters we have not used before. What kind of parameters? Dreth asked. I told them to ignore what we expected to find and simply report what was actually there. The display flickered and changed, and a collective gasp rose from the assembled counselors, where 12 industrial worlds should have been. The map now showed hundreds of points of light, each one representing electromagnetic activity consistent with heavy manufacturing. Each one a world the Dominion had somehow missed or ignored. I count 347 industrial centers, Vaethra said into the stunned silence. And these are only the ones our sensors can detect from this distance. That cannot be accurate, Karath said, though his voice had lost all its earlier confidence. We have been monitoring human space for 3 decades, and we saw what they wanted us to see. Vaethra cut him off. Our sensor sweeps focused on the worlds we already knew about. Our intelligence operatives watched the populations we expected to exist. Our analysts interpreted data through the lens of what we believed was true. She zoomed the display out further and more. Lights appeared, spreading across regions of space that the Dominion had classified as uninhabited, filling the darkness between stars with signs of civilization. The humans did not hide their expansion from us, Vaethra continued. They simply did it in places we were not looking, in systems we had dismissed as worthless. In the dark spaces between our patrol routes, High Counselor Dreth leaned forward in his seat, his ancient joints creaking with the movement. What about their military? He asked. If they have 300 worlds instead of 12, Then how many ships do they actually have? Vaithra hesitated for just a moment before answering. Based on the sensor data and projected industrial capacity, my analysts estimate a minimum of 40,000 combat-capable vessels. The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors shouting over each other, some demanding to know how this was possible. Others calling for immediate military action. Still others questioning whether the data could be trusted at all. Silence, Dreth commanded, and his voice carried enough authority to quiet even the most agitated counselors. He turned his cold gaze back to Vaithra. You said minimum estimate. What is the maximum? We do not know, Vaithra admitted. The sensor data suggests there may be significant military installations in regions we cannot scan from here. And if the humans have been hiding their true capabilities for 30 years, then we have no way to know what else they have concealed. She paused and took a breath before delivering the final piece of information. However, I did find one more thing that the council needs to see. The display changed again to show a recording. Grainy and distorted, but clear enough to make out the essential details. It showed a human shipyard, vast beyond anything the Dominion had ever built, with hundreds of vessels in various stages of construction. And in the center of the image was a ship unlike anything Vaithra had ever seen. It was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the Eternal Sovereignty, bristling with weapons that her analysts could not identify, surrounded by support vessels that attended to it like workers serving a queen. We intercepted this transmission 6 hours ago, Vaithra said. It was broadcast on an open channel, which means they wanted us to see it. Why would they want us to see their shipyard? Thrall asked. Because they are not afraid of us anymore, Vaithra said. Because they want us to know what is coming. Because for 30 years, they have been pretending to be weak, while building something that could challenge the entire Dominion fleet. The recording ended and the display returned to the star map with its hundreds of hidden worlds. Minister Kareth had sunk into a seat near the back of the chamber, his earlier bravado completely gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone whose entire career had just been revealed as a catastrophic failure. What do you recommend? Grand Admiral, Dreth asked. Vaithra turned to face the High Counselor directly. I recommend that we stop thinking of humanity as a minor threat to be crushed at our convenience, she said. I recommend that we mobilize every ship in the Dominion fleet. I recommend that we begin emergency construction at every shipyard we control. And I recommend that we do all of this immediately. You believe they will attack us, Dreth said. I believe they have been planning to attack us since the day we first invaded their space, Vaithra replied. And I believe they are almost ready. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the assembled counselors. For 4,000 years, the Dominion Empire had conquered every species it encountered, had crushed every resistance, had never faced an enemy it could not defeat. But now, for the first time in their long history, they faced the terrifying possibility that they had finally met their match, and they had spent 30 years helping that enemy prepare for war. 3 days after the emergency session of the High Council, every communication device in the Dominion Empire activated at the same moment. It happened on warships patrolling the borders and on civilian transports moving between worlds, on space stations orbiting gas giants, and on planetary networks serving billions of citizens, on personal devices and military command centers and everything in between. Every screen displayed the same image. Every speaker broadcast the same voice. And for one frozen moment, the entire Dominion Empire stopped to watch. The image showed a human female sitting at a plain metal desk in a simple gray uniform. And she looked old by human standards, with white hair pulled back from her weathered face and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of careful thought. But those eyes were what caught the attention of everyone who watched, because they held no anger and no triumph and no fear, only a patience so deep and so calm that it was somehow more unsettling than any threat could have been. "My name is Admiral Helena Vance," she said, and her voice was clear and steady. "I am the Supreme Commander of the United Human Defense Initiative, and I am broadcasting to every citizen and soldier of the Dominion Empire across 1,000 worlds." Dominion citizens froze in front of their screens, unable to look away from this human who'd somehow seized control of their entire communication network on the bridge of the eternal sovereignty. Grand Admiral Vathra stood motionless as she watched the transmission, her claws digging into the armrests of her command chair. 31 years ago, Admiral Vance continued, your empire attacked our colony world of New Helsinki without warning and without provocation. And in what your leaders called a compliance action, you killed 2,300,000 human beings. She paused for just a moment. Men and women and children. Families who had done nothing wrong except exist in space that the Dominion decided it wanted. Innocent people who burned alive when your ships turned their weapons on civilian population centers. Her expression did not change, but something in her voice grew harder. You expected us to surrender after New Helsinki. You expected us to see the futility of resistance and submit to Dominion rule, the way 200 other species had submitted before us. You expected your terror to break our will. She shook her head. Slowly, you were wrong. Admiral Vance leaned back, slightly in her chair, and folded her hands on the desk in front of her. You assumed we were weak because we were a young species. You assumed we were few because we hid our true numbers. You assumed we were primitive because we did not announce our capabilities. And you assumed these things because we wanted you to assume them. Every battle we barely won was a performance. Every resource shortage we struggled through was an act. Every census we published was a lie. And for 30 years, you believed all of it because you could not imagine that a species you considered inferior could possibly deceive you on world after world. Dominion citizens exchanged uncertain glances as they listened to this human speak, with such calm certainty about things that shook the Costa foundations of everything they believed. Your species has conquered through terror. For 4,000 years, Vance continued. You attack without warning. You destroy civilian targets. You make examples of anyone who resists. And you do this because you believe that if you hurt a species enough, they will submit rather than face more pain. This strategy has worked on 200 civilizations across this region of space. And it has always worked because those species were not prepared for the level of cruelty you were willing to inflict. She leaned forward now, and her eyes seemed to look directly at every viewer across the empire. It will not work on humanity. We do not submit. We do not forget. And we do not forgive. The transmission flickered slightly, and the view shifted to show a massive viewport behind Admiral Vance. And through that viewport, the stars were visible. But they were not just stars. There was something else out there. Something that blocked out the light of those distant suns. Something so vast that it took a moment for the viewers to understand what they were seeing. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships, arranged in formations that stretched beyond the range of the camera, filling the void with holes of dark metal and bristling weapons. You wanted to see our real military, Admiral Vance said. And for the first time, there was something that might have been satisfaction in her voice. So here it is. The view pulled back further and more ships became visible, more formations, more weapons. An armada beyond anything the Dominion had ever assembled or even imagined. 1.2 million combat vessels, Vance said. Crewed by 18 billion soldiers who have trained their entire lives for this moment. Supported by industrial capacity that dwarfs your entire empire. She let that number hang in the air for a moment, and we are not coming to negotiate. The viewport behind her closed and the view returned to just Admiral Vance at her desk, her hands still folded, her expression still calm, Some of you may be wondering why we waited so long, she said. Why we spent 30 years hiding and building instead of striking back immediately after New Helsinki. The answer is simple. We knew we could not defeat you as we were, so we became something else. We evacuated our visible colonies and moved our people to hidden worlds. We built secret shipyards and systems you never bothered to survey. We developed weapons and technologies in laboratories you did not know existed. And we watched you. We studied your tactics and your strategies and your weaknesses. We learned how you think and how you fight and how you fail. And we planned for every possible scenario. By the time you realized what we were doing, it was already too late. Admiral Vance stood up from her desk and walked toward the camera until her face filled the screen. To the soldiers of the Dominion military, she said, "You will have a choice in the days to come. You can fight and die for an empire that has brought nothing but suffering to this region of space. Or you can surrender and be treated with the dignity that your leaders never showed to their victims, to the citizens of the Dominion worlds. You are not our enemies. You have been told lies about humanity, just as you have been told lies about everything else. And when this war is over, you will have the chance to build something better than what your leaders created." And to the High Council and the admirals and the ministers who gave the orders that killed my people, a voice dropped lower but remained steady. "We are coming for you specifically. And there is nowhere in this galaxy where you can hide." The transmission flickered one final time. "You had 30 years to prepare for this moment," Admiral Vance said. "We had 30 years too. The difference is that we used our time wisely." The screen went dark. And across the Dominion Empire, there was only silence as billions of citizens tried to process what they had just heard. The bridge of the eternal sovereignty. Grand Admiral Vathra finally released her grip on her command chair and looked at the blank screen with an expression that mixed fear with something that might have been respect. "Grand Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "what do we do now?" Vathra did not answer immediately because she did not have an answer for the first time in her career. For the first time in the history of the Dominion Empire, they were facing an enemy who was not afraid, and that changed everything. The first human attack came without warning. Exactly as the Dominion had always attacked others, the Vestari shipyards had served the Empire for over 800 years, producing the warships that had conquered 200 worlds, employing millions of workers across dozens of orbital platforms, representing the single largest military construction facility in all of Dominion space. The garrison commander received the alert at exactly 1400 hours local time, his sensors detecting 1,200 human vessels. Emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect synchronized formation, he smiled when he saw the numbers. Because the shipyards were protected by 40 orbital defense platforms and a garrison fleet of 300 warships, which meant the humans were outnumbered and outgunned, which meant they had made a fatal mistake. All platforms locked targets. He ordered confidently. All ships moved to intercept. "We will teach these humans what happens when they attack Dominion territory." The defense platforms began their targeting sequences. Massive weapons arrays swiveling to track the incoming human vessels. Crews rushing to battle stations with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had never lost a fight. And then the humans did something unexpected. They did not slow down to engage the platforms. They did not fire a single shot at the garrison fleet. They did not behave like any enemy the Dominion had ever faced. Instead, they simply launched projectiles, thousands of them. Small metal objects that streaked toward the shipyards themselves at speeds that made them almost impossible to track. "What are they doing?" the garrison commander asked. Confusion replacing his earlier confidence. His tactical officer's face went pale as the sensor data came in. "Sir, those projectiles are not missiles. They are kinetic weapons." Tungsten rods accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. And they are not targeting our defenses. Then what? The first impacts hit before he could finish the question. Kinetic weapons do not explode like missiles or energy weapons. They simply transfer their enormous momentum into whatever they hit. And at the speeds these projectiles were traveling, that momentum was catastrophic. The first orbital platform simply ceased to exist, transformed from a massive construction facility into an expanding cloud of superheated debris in less than a second. The second platform followed, then the third, then dozens more as the rain of tungsten death swept through the shipyards with unstoppable precision. Ships under construction were torn apart before they could even power up their systems. Storage facilities containing years of accumulated resources vanished in flashes of light. Crew quarters and worker habitations were shattered into fragments that tumbled away into the void. Garrison fleet tried to intercept the projectiles, but there were too many of them moving too fast. And the defense platforms tried to shoot them down, but their weapons were designed for slower targets. And in the end, all they could do was watch as 800 years of construction was reduced to rubble in less than 2 minutes. And then, before a single Dominion weapon could achieve target lock on the human vessels, the entire fleet jumped back into faster-than-light travel and vanished. The peace attack had lasted 9 seconds from first launch to final impact when the garrison commander filed his report. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely operate his console 4. Hours later, it happened again at the Korath Fuel Depot. 6 hours after that had happened, at the Vesser communication relay. By the end of the first day, the humans had struck 17 critical targets across Dominion space, and not a single human ship had been damaged, and not a single human soldier had died. Grand Admiral Vathra studied the attack patterns from her command center on the Eternal Sovereignty and felt a growing sense of dread as she began to understand what the humans were doing. They are not trying to hold territory, she said to her assembled staff officers. They are not trying to capture resources or take prisoners or win battles in any traditional sense. She pulled up a strategic map showing all the targets the humans had hit in the first 24 hours. Look at what they are targeting. Fuel depots that supply our fleets, shipyards that build our vessels, communication relays that connect our systems, ammunition factories that supply our weapons. They are dismantling our ability to make war, she continued, systematically and precisely, hitting exactly the targets that will cause the most damage to our military capacity. One of her officers spoke up with barely controlled anger in his voice. Then we strike back. We attack their colonies. We burn their worlds the way they burned our shipyards. We make them feel the same pain. Vathra shook her head slowly. We tried that. I sent a battle group to attack their nearest colony world as soon as the offensive began. And what happened? The colony was empty. She pulled up images from the attack, showing abandoned cities and silent factories and homes that looked like their inhabitants had simply walked away, not destroyed, not defended, just empty, everyone gone, evacuated to somewhere we cannot find. We found recordings left behind, she continued. Personal messages from families to whoever might find them. And do you know what those messages said? Her officers waited in silence. They said goodbye. They said they knew we would come to hurt them. And they said they had already left to be with the rest of humanity in places the Dominion would never find. She displayed one of the recordings, showing a human family, parents and children standing together in their home. We know you will burn this place when you find it, the father said in the recording. We know you will destroy everything we built here. But it does not matter because we already took everything that matters with us. Our families are safe and our people are free, and you cannot hurt us anymore. The recording ended, and Vathra looked at her officers. They knew we would retaliate against their visible colonies. They planned for it. They evacuated everyone to hidden locations before they even launched their first attack. "You cannot take hostages if there are no hostages to take," she said, quoting something she had read in one of the recovered human messages. The implications of this settled over the room like a cold shadow. "They are not fighting a war in any way we understand," Vathra said quietly. "They are not trying to defeat our military or occupy our territory, or force us to negotiate." She looked at the strategic map with all its markers showing destroyed facilities and empty colonies and spreading chaos. "They are conducting an extinction. They mean to destroy the Dominion Empire completely, to take apart everything we have built over 4,000 years. And they have been planning exactly how to do it for 3 decades. One of her younger officers spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can they actually succeed?" Vathra did not answer immediately because she was not sure she wanted to admit the truth, but these were her officers, and they deserved honesty. "If they continue at their current rate of destruction," she said finally, "our industrial capacity will be reduced to less than 10% within 6 months. Our fleet will be unable to operate effectively within 4 months due to fuel and ammunition shortages. And our communication networks will be so damaged that coordinated defense will become impossible within weeks. So yes," she said, meeting the young officer's eyes, "they can succeed. And unless something changes dramatically, they will." The room fell silent as the full weight of the situation pressed down on everyone present. For 4,000 years, the Dominion Empire had been the hunter, the predator, the unstoppable force that crushed all resistance. Now, for the first time, they were the prey, and the hunters were just getting started. 6 months after the first human attack, the Dominion Empire existed in name only. Grand Admiral Vathra stood on the bridge of the Eternal Sovereignty and looked out at the scattered remains of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy. 47 ships where there had once been thousands. Wounded vessels running on emergency power with crews exhausted beyond measure. The ship itself was damaged. Hull breaches sealed with emergency patches. Weapons arrays functioning at less than half capacity. Engines struggling to maintain basic propulsion after months of constant running and fighting and fleeing. They had been hunted across Dominion space like animals, jumping from system to system, trying to find safe harbor, trying to regroup with other survivors, trying to find any place where the human fleets had not already been. There was nowhere left to hide. The great shipyards were rubble. The fuel depots were burning debris fields. The communication networks were so fragmented that systems could go weeks without any contact from Central Command. And the once mighty Dominion military had been reduced to scattered groups of survivors, desperately trying to stay alive for one more day. Vathra had watched it happen with growing horror over the past 6 months. Had seen ancient fortresses fall in minutes. Had watched legendary admirals die in battles they could not win. Had felt the empire crumbling around her while she was powerless to stop it, and still the humans came. They were relentless in a way that seemed almost mechanical, striking with precision that never wavered, advancing with patience that never faltered, grinding down Dominion resistance with the cold efficiency of a machine designed for one purpose: destruction. Communication alerts sounded on the bridge, and Vathra turned to see her communications officer looking at her with an expression of exhausted resignation. "Grand Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the homeworld." The homeworld? The center of Dominion civilization for 4,000 years, the seat of the High Council, the symbol of everything the Empire had built. Vathra had been trying to reach the homeworld for 3 weeks without success. "Put it through," she ordered. The main view screen flickered to life and showed the face of High Counselor Dreth. But he was not the proud and commanding leader she remembered from the emergency sessions 6 months ago. He looked broken, his chitin cracked and gray with stress, his eyes hollow with fear and defeat. his voice trembling as he spoke. Grand Admiral Vathra, if you receive this message, know that the humans have arrived. The view shifted to show a tactical display of the homeworld and the space around it. And what Vathra saw made her heart stop. Ships, millions of ships, arranged in formations that surrounded the planet in every direction, like a shell of dark metal and bristling weapons. So many vessels that the stars themselves were hidden behind them. They are not firing, Dreth continued, his voice barely above a whisper. They are just waiting, surrounding us, millions of them. And we cannot understand why they have not attacked. The view shifted again, and Vathra saw something that made her realize exactly why the humans were waiting. Behind the human fleet, barely visible against the darkness of space, were other ships. Vessels of design she recognized from ancient intelligence files. Ships belonging to species the Dominion had conquered centuries ago. The Vorthan were there, and the Thesari, and the Krull, and dozens of other species she recognized, all of them watching. All of them waiting to see what would happen next. The humans had brought an audience. They are hailing us now, Dreth said, and his voice cracked with something between terror and resignation. They want to speak. The transmission flickered, and Admiral Helena Vance appeared on the screen. The same calm expression she had worn in her first broadcast. The same patient eyes that seemed to see everything. High Counselor Dreth, she said, and her voice was quiet but carried clearly. Your empire conquered 200 species over 4,000 years. You eradicated 31 of them entirely when they refused to submit. You enslaved billions and ruled through terror because you believed no one could stop you. She paused. Someone can stop you now. What do you want from us? Dreth asked. And there was no pride left in his voice, only desperation. Terms of surrender. Tribute, territory, we will give you anything you ask. We will do whatever you demand. Just tell us what you want. Admiral Vance shook her head slowly. We do not want anything you can give us, she said. We do not want your territory because we have plenty of our own. We do not want your resources because we have built our own industrial base. We do not want your submission because your submission means nothing to us. Then what? Dreth begged. What is the purpose of all this? Why did you destroy our empire if you do not want what we have? We want you to understand, Vance replied. And her voice grew harder. We want every species you ever terrorized to see this moment. To watch as the great and terrible Dominion Empire begs for mercy from the species you dismissed as primitive and weak and insignificant. We want the galaxy to know that terror is not invincible, that cruelty can be defeated, that 4,000 years of oppression can be ended by people who refuse to be afraid. She leaned forward. We are not doing this for territory or resources or power. High Counselor, we are doing this because it is right. Because someone needed to stop you. Because the universe is better without an empire that burns children to make a point. The transmission shifted back to Dreth, and Vathra could see tears forming in his ancient eyes. Please, he said. There must be something we can offer. Some way to end this. There is one thing, Vance said, and her voice softened slightly. You can tell the truth. Tell the galaxy what you did to the species you conquered. Tell them about the massacres and the slave camps and the extinction events. Tell them about New Helsinki and all the other worlds you burned. And let your own people hear the truth about the empire they served. And then, she continued, you can face justice. Not revenge, not execution, but actual justice. Trials conducted fairly with evidence presented openly. Punishment determined by the crimes committed. The Dominion Empire ends today, she concluded. But what comes next is up to you. It can end with truth and justice and the possibility of redemption. Or it can end with your homeworld joining the list of worlds the Dominion destroyed. The choice is yours. The transmission ended and Dreth stood motionless for a long moment, before turning back to face the camera that connected him to Vathra. Grand Admiral, he said quietly, I am accepting their terms. I am ordering all remaining Dominion forces to stand down. The war is over. Vathra wanted to argue, wanted to suggest some strategy they had not tried. Wanted to believe there was still a way to fight, but she looked at her damaged ship and her exhausted crew and the impossible fleet surrounding the homeworld. And she knew the truth, it had been over from the moment the humans launched their first attack, maybe. It had been over from the moment the Dominion burned New Helsinki 31 years ago. She thought about everything that had led to this moment, about all the assumptions and errors and arrogance that had blinded the Empire to what humanity really was. They had seen human kindness and called it weakness, human patience and called it fear, human silence and called it ignorance. They had not understood what they were looking at in her final log entry, recorded as she prepared to surrender her ship. Vathra wrote words she hoped other species would someday read. We made a mistake that cost us everything. We saw a young species and assumed they were prey because that is what we wanted them to be. We did not understand that they were not hiding because they were afraid of us. They were hiding because they were not ready yet. They are ready now. And the galaxy will never be the same. She transmitted the log and then walked to the viewport to watch as human shuttles began their approach, the Dominion Empire. 4,000 years of conquest and terror and unquestioned power ended not with a final desperate battle, but with quiet surrender to a species they had once dismissed as insignificant and somewhere in the vast human fleet. Admiral Helena Vance allowed herself a small smile as she watched the Dominion flag being lowered from the homeworld's government complex. 31 years ago, she had been a young officer on New Helsinki, had watched her family burn, had sworn that she would make the Dominion pay for what they had done. Today, that oath was fulfilled. The humans had won, not because they were stronger or more numerous or more advanced, but because they had been patient enough to wait and smart enough to plan and determined enough to never give up. They had become the thing that ends empires, and they had done it without becoming the monsters they fought. That, Vance thought as she watched the Dominion surrender, was the most human victory of all.